Yo guys, Vision Shen here, back with more Marvel Rivals content. Today's video will be showing you the best DPS gameplay for each individual duelist, the 7th episode of my new Lord series to this channel, and this episode will be for Black Widow, showing you the best gameplay possible. Now, to remind you guys, in case you haven't seen the previous episodes on the channel, this catch of this series is that I have to earn the Lord icon on each of the heroes to be shown in this series before I can even upload them to this channel. So as you can imagine, this will take us some time to complete, but I'm always up for the challenge, and in this video I'll give you my advice on how best to use the hero, the strengths and weaknesses, the do's and the don'ts from my own experiences, as well as any tips along the way generally that I've learned from both using the character, but also on how best to earn the Lord icon in the fastest and most efficient way. So, without further ado, let's get on into it. So I guess first things first, I always like to start this series off with in these episodes is that this is not a guide. I want to make that very clear from the get-go. If anyone that is here is looking for a guide, I already have one of those that is linked in the description below that goes into more detail on the character's abilities, all the damage outputs, and so on, the cooldowns, all of the extra details that you guys will be looking for. That is separately on the channel and linked in the description below. So in case you guys weren't aware, this is not a guide. This is me purely just trying to give you guys an overview of my own experiences on how best to earn the character in the Lord, but also my journey on playing this character and all of the things that I learned about using it, the strengths and the weaknesses, and the do's and don'ts and all that sort of stuff. So she is a duelist in this game, a ranged hero, a marksman as you will, who is also a sneaky close quarter assassin, where I found this character to be really effective, especially against dive heroes like Black Panther and Spider-Man. Now, albeit she doesn't get any love in this game due to how underwhelming she is to use, but also how ineffective she is in most team comps, especially in competitive at the ranked higher levels and stuff like that. But that doesn't or shouldn't take away how effective she can be in good hands, especially for skilled players. And I think overall she was definitely one of the most fun characters to use. I think there are some things I want to go over in this video that I don't want to make this a video about how ranting about how the character needs to be tweaked or whatever it may be, but for the most part there are certain elements of this character that just doesn't make sense in comparison to other duelists in this game, and we'll get into that further down the video. But in itself, I'd say she's definitely fun character to use, and with regards to the system or the meta of where she plays in competitive, I would say she's not really viable for the grand scheme of things, which is quite unfortunate because the character is definitely a fun character in itself, but she just does not sort of play well with most different systems. She's a long-range hero who is definitely viable in one-on-one situations versus most other heroes due to the kick ability and her ranged output. Team up doesn't really make her much stronger than she already is, but it definitely is viable. But the issue is you're not really going to get both her and Punisher on a team together, at least not in competitive from my own experiences, and at least not going to have a successful team comp in that sort of scenario that I would say this just doesn't really work well. So I'd say maybe that the team up needs to change to maybe a Vanguard and maybe the likes of her, but I will have to see how it plays out in future updates. I just think the character in itself definitely needs a lot of tweaking. I'm not asking for her to be overpowered or anything like that. There's just a few characters where you compare her to, it just doesn't really make sense as to why she's so weak. And for the most part, I would say I grinded this character out in majority of my games in the Doom match category. I didn't really play her in competitive. I don't even think I played her more than 1 or 2 times. I did play her a little bit in quick play, but overall I really enjoyed using her in sort of Doom match in itself in a free-for-all environment, which is really good for the most part. I reckon it took me about 19 hours, I think, when I looked at my stats on this character, on how long it took me to get this character to Lord, which isn't that long by any means, but it also isn't quick. Like, I got Scarlet Witch to Lord in about 13.5 hours, which is a lot quicker, and there is more efficient ways to doing that, and I'll go over that at the end of the video on the best ways that you want to get this character to Lord. Now, for the character in itself, I'd say her strengths and weaknesses. Her kick is a really powerful ability in this game, especially when used right, and especially also when timed right and combined with her kit management, using her rifle to do initial entry damage, making it a great one-hit combo almost. When you shoot someone, you do the kick, you bring them in, and you leave them vulnerable to an extra sort of follow-up kick, which is basically going to give them a one-hit combo effect, where they're going to be able to do nothing about it unless they have defensive capabilities like Iron Fist or Magic or whatever it may be. And as well as this, I'd say her mobility is really good. The spring and the jump ability is just also really effective, being able to create high ground or create off angles as well as evading to safety, keeping her in the fight, but whilst also sort of being effective from both a damage output as well as a safety point of view. Her team up doesn't make her much more viable, but it definitely is a stronger benefit to having on this character. I'd say her damage output is significantly improved by having this team ability. So when you can get a Punisher on your team and you can play the likes of Black Widow, I would definitely make the most of it because this character is going to be really fun with that sort of rifle enhanced ability that gives her the extra damage output in itself. But I'd say as her weaknesses, she has quite a few more than I'd say her strengths. Probably one of the only characters in the game where I'd say she has more weaknesses than she does have strengths. Starting with the fact that she's a very squishy character, and once the sprint ability runs out or she doesn't have her kick, I would say she's very vulnerable to the likes of dive heroes being able to pick her off, or even ranged heroes being able to pick her off as well. I'd say her ultimate ability is definitely situational, but almost useless individually, but you can make it sort of a good team ultimate, like ability where you place it down and sort of set up other ultimates on your team, making the enemies vulnerable and all that sort of stuff, slowing them down. But really, I would say it's just not a great ultimate and definitely needs some reworking. She also lacks consistent damage output, unless you're really precise and really sort of hitting your shots and feeling it. On moving targets, she's just not really going to be a strong hero. Like I said, unless you're on computer, sort of mouse and key, and you're playing on PC, this character just isn't the best for console unless you're really good at snapping and just generally gifted with the ability to be able to snipe. And I'd also say she's probably the weakest hero in the entire game, although she is definitely fun and also satisfying to both shut down dive heroes with the kick, as well as just using her for a long range perspective. She's just not consistent enough versus most heroes in the game, and I'm not talking about from a Doom match point of view. Like I said, that's where I mostly played her. Just generally all around, I would say in competitive, she's just not going to be viable due to the inconsistency, especially with her damage output and as well as her being so weak vulnerable. And she only has 2 abilities after as well, so we can't even like talk about the fact that this character has multiple abilities where she's really strong, and maybe it's just like a skill point of view or whatever it may be. She literally doesn't have much kit, and she also hasn't really got a comparable sort of status against other heroes. There's better ranged heroes, there's better close quarter heroes, and there's better aspects with team ultimates and all that sort of stuff. So just in almost every single category, there is just multiple heroes that are better in every single way, and this is kind of what I would say with the character being such a weak hero all around. And as for the do's and the don'ts, I say you can't really deal with multiple enemies with this character at one single time effectively, so I would avoid sort of being isolated and fighting multiple enemies at one single time. Of course, you can use the ultimate ability, place it at your feet, slow enemies, make them invulnerable, do the kick, shoot people, whatever it may be. You can, of course, do it. I'm just saying she's not going to be viable versus multiple enemies. She has no AoE, and therefore she's going to lack sort of taking on 1 or 2 people at the same time. But I would also say she's very competent and almost really effective in 1v1 scenarios, and especially when played right versus most other heroes in the game. So force out when you can, caught out sort of enemies off guard when they're out of ultimate abilities, or when they're in rotation to their team, or around the objective being on their own. Use the rifle and kick combo to really sort of excel at taking those advantages, because in 1v1 situations there was not many characters that I would say you want to basically avoid. And for the most part, I would say she's really fun and easy to use. Playing from my own experiences and based on personal advice and sort of the ranking of the character, I'd say she's slightly effective at shutting down pesky dive heroes. I wouldn't say she's an effective character overall, but she's definitely someone that I would say is almost doesn't get recognized for being good against the likes of Black Panther, Spider-Man, Star-Lord. There's a handful of other characters that I would say she's really effective at shutting down. But from my own experiences, the likes of Mr. Fantastic, Iron Fist, maybe even Magic and the Thing, these are all probably the hardest heroes that I came across in isolation due to their high sustain, so I would definitely avoid playing against these characters in close quarter situations. And I'd say also, I played a lot of this character in Doom match, so from a lot of my own experiences on the Lord grind, most of my issues technically come from like 1v1 situations, because that's kind of where I put myself for the most part. So in quick play, or even in ranked, if you guys can play this character or have played this character and got good experiences in the competitive playlist, especially at a higher level, I would say I'd like to hear if you guys have some good tips and tricks that you could share for both myself and also newer players to the game that maybe are trying to grind out Lord, as well as just generally learn and play the character in itself, because I don't really think, in my own experiences in the GM and Celestial level, I don't ever see this character being used unless someone's either trolling or just sitting back at spawn. And for the most part, I'd say even from Season 1 all the way to now, she's just never been a viable hero to use at that level. Now, just before I get into the Lord aspect of this video, talk about the efficient ways and all of the sort of tips and tricks that I've learned along the way, I just wanted to talk about a comparison to the Winter Soldier. Now, this is a character I usually sort of think of as an example of someone I came across in Doom match a lot, and just looked at how I sort of died in comparison to how easy it is to use that character versus the likes of Black Widow. And like I said, I'm really trying my best not to make this any sort of a rant or anything, but there are certain things and issues with this character that do need to be addressed, and I do hope eventually they get around to sorting this character out, because it's almost like it's useless having her in the game, because she almost feels useless. Although, like I said, she is fun to use, and I have got her Lord, so I've got clearly a good sort of testament to want to play this character, as well as just enjoying her for the most part. I would say there is definitely many issues and more sort of weaknesses than there are strengths, as I alluded to earlier, that need to be addressed in its most part. And either you're going to sort this character out and make it a viable character at one point or another, or it just really was not worth even having her in the game, because she pretty much is not viable at competitive. And even in quick play, there's so many other options. With there being 22, I think, sort of duelists in the game now, there's just so many other options that are better sort of suited for this game. And the biggest example or comparison, like I said, is the Winter Soldier. That character to me doesn't make any sense when you think about the two characters in comparison to one another. For example, he has so much sustain, and yet his damage output is far more consistent than the likes of Black Widow. His hitbox on hitting targets is really large. You don't really even have to be accurate with the character, whereas Black Widow has to be super accurate, especially on moving targets. And even if you shoot an Iron Man, if you guys have played Black Widow and you try shoot a flying Iron Man, unless you headshot him, it takes you 4 shots to take out Iron Man from the sky, whereas with the Winter Soldier, you just have to use 2 shots. And even with that character, you can literally use all 3 of your shots, pop an ability, it reloads your gun, and it also gives you overshield and so extra sustain. You have so many more abilities available to you, and we're not even talking about the ultimate ability and the base health being better. The ultimate ability, of course, for the Winter Soldier is so much better. And just in comparison, when you think about the Black Widow, although the characters are not similar in any sort of nature, because he's a high sort of sustain hybrid duelist in itself with great damage output and defensive capabilities, Black Widow is just, whenever I came across the Winter Soldier in sort of isolation or one-on-one situations, there really isn't any chance you have to beating him unless the other player you'll come across just isn't good at the game. And that is of what it is, because even in skilled hands, like I got to this character in 19 hours, so I played a lot of time using it. I would like to think I'm more of a competent player at this game. Of course, there are better Black Widows. That's not what I'm trying to say. The point I'm making is, even with the amount of hours I spent playing this character, there really wasn't many situations where you could beat certain heroes, and it just felt almost pointless, because, and I get that's the point of the game in any sense, that there are certain heroes and matchups where you're not going to be better and you're meant to be able to lose these gunfights or whatever it may be. But for the most part, the two characters are very similar. They're both gun-wielding heroes, and they have certain abilities that do the similar senses, with the likes of his uppercut ability versus her kick ability. They're similar, but also there is just no comparison where he comes out in the worst situation. He's just better in every single regard. And it's like there are so many other heroes like Hawkeye, Hela, Punisher, that you almost want to use better from a range point of view. And even at close quarters, there's just no other hero that you would say is worse than her at close quarters. And it just makes you question, what was the point of having this character in the game if she's going to be so useless in the grand scheme of things? And I guess that's kind of the rant I wanted to talk about, because from using her for all the way through the 19 hours, getting her to Lord, there were just so many situations where I was thought, I had to be so precise and flick on all of my shots so accurately, but I'll die to a Winter Soldier. Look at his kill cam. He weren't even firstly hitting me with half of his shots. Secondly, every time he used an ability, it reloaded his gun. It also gave him an overshield, so anytime I tried to sort of kick him and made him weak, I had to hit him like 10 more times than he hit me. It just didn't make any sense to me why the characters are so far apart, and yet they're in the exact same category, and she's meant to be a viable hero for the grand scheme of things. Like I said, rant over. I can go on and on, but I don't want to make this video a whole rant about Black Widow. I just think the character definitely needs some sort of tweaking and some major buffs and sort of changes to the fact that the ultimate ability is almost useless, but also she's just not really going to be a pick in competitive or even in any game mode for the most part, because there's just so many better heroes. And I would like to see a little bit more love, maybe give her a new ability, maybe change the team ability, or maybe just completely change the ultimate to make it more fun and exciting for new players, as well as existing players who want to play this character more. Like I said, I've ticked off the list, I've got her to Lord, I really enjoyed the journey in itself. In summary, I would say she is definitely a fun character to both learn, understanding her mechanics, her cooldowns for the kick, and her playstyle is definitely worth learning and using, especially if you're a Duelist main. You'll really like playing this long range and close quarter hero. And then quickly, just before we wrap up the video, I did just want to touch on getting this character to Lord in the most efficient way. So first thing, I always say this in every video, generally speaking, I would not suggest playing just one singular hero, and I would consider changing up your hero from game to game depending on different team comps, as well as just changing the role maybe. Playing just Duelist in every single game and grinding out 5 different Duelists on the same go is not something I would personally recommend. So if you guys are looking for tips and most efficient methods, change up the hero and have multiple on the go, because there are certain team comps, maps, and modes that are just not going to benefit playing the single hero, especially for Black Widow. The second thing I would say is always focus on the Lord-specific requirement for that hero. The hero-specific area, which is for this character, is for Black Widow, is for getting critical kills. Now, I would say this is definitely one of the hardest Lord-specific, sort of hero-specific character requirements for getting a character to Lord, because you have to be insanely accurate, and trying to get 30, I think it's 35 headshots in order to get 40 plus points at the Centurion level 2 Lord was pretty hard of a task to require someone, and especially if you're playing Doom match, you'd probably get only a couple a game, maybe 2, 3, 4, depending on how accurate you are, and even if you win the game. So it would take you, let's say, 5 to maybe 10 games to even get that first one done, whereas other characters like Scarlet Witch, you could do that hero-specific requirement twice in one game over, which means you're going to do it a lot quicker. So in the grand scheme of things, I would say definitely focus on that Lord-specific or hero-specific requirement to get this character to Lord, as well as the general other things of final hits, just playing time in general, as well as damage output. All of those other things will help you get Lord quicker in this character. But that's pretty much it, guys. In summary, if you guys have enjoyed the video, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. It massively helps me out. If you have any comments or thoughts about playing this character, using any of the sort of abilities in itself, and tips and tricks, whatever you may have about the ultimate ability, or if you have any agreements or disagreements with any of the views that I shared about this character, let me know down below in the comments and I'll get right back to you. I'm Vision Gen. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.